Hi everyone, thank you for watching our Beef Brunch Educational Series webinar for January of 2023. We are doing things a little different this month and not offering this as a live webinar. Last July, we hosted a Marketing Your Beef workshop at our Deanley Research Station in Alexandria. Since then, we have had multiple requests for some of the content and thought it would be good to post a couple of those recordings as part of the Beef Brunch series. This month you will be hearing from Mr. Persica. Boo serves as a manager of the Meat Science Laboratory at LSU and is a lecturer in the School of Animal Sciences. Next month you will hear the second recording we are posting from this workshop. During that video, Mr. Tyler Bro, lecturer and 4-H livestock specialist, will discuss quality and yield grades of cattle. Please feel free to email me with any questions you may have on this webinar, and I can get those to Boo for him to answer for you. My contact details are in the video and podcast descriptions.
My name is Manuel Persica. Everybody calls me Boo, so it's okay. I see there's a handful of people here who know me by that. I run the LSU Meat Lab. Most people don't know, but on campus between Tiger Stadium and the Union, there's a slaughter and processing facility that's been there since 1936. And I've just been kind of carrying that torch for them for about 27 years I've been working there. We solely do teaching, research, and extension work. We don't do any custom. So our goal is to teach individuals and to help processors and whatever else needs to be done, but we're not going to compete with anybody. So been there for about 27, 28 years. Probably a lot longer if you add the student years, but we're not going to do that. So they asked me to come talk about harvesting and processing. And so the take I took on that is, how can I take these steps of this process, harvesting and going into processing, and help y'all understand more of what we can do as cattlemen that will help us make a little bit better product or not have negative effects on our livestock. And so I went that way. I don't have a whole lot of pictures. It's going to be kind of boring, but I'm going to talk. Obviously, ask questions. All right, this is kind of a round table deal in my head. So I want to visit with y'all when we have questions about things. But we're just going to go through the processes and help y'all get an idea of where y'all need to be with when you're getting ready to get something harvested, and then what questions to ask your processor. That can kind of help you make a better product. And I'm sure I'm going to mess this up, but we're going to try with other things. So everything we do, we know this. A lot of stuff, some of the other speakers have touched on, so I'll kind of go through them kind of quick. And I'll even make these slides. Ashley, I guess y'all can make these slides. Y'all have email addresses and stuff. We could send these slides to y'all if y'all want. Right. Okay. But they're not that dynamic. They're not that exciting. So everything we do from the time we start selecting animals that we're going to breed together to the time we cook that steak has an effect on the product that we put out there. We know that. This is something I've heard over the years. It's not necessarily something that everybody that's in this industry has thought about before, but thank goodness we're all kind of getting there. I think Marty talked about it a little bit. We don't all have the same market either. Okay, we're not all trying to sell cattle to the same exact place. They're not all going to be steaks. We know we can sell steaks. So we kind of know what our market is. That's going to help us make key decisions from day one on what we can do that's going to increase or at least stabilize the quality and the yield of our product. There's so many things affect an animal prior to that harvest step that has so much long-lasting effect on meat that some people don't get to see. And that's the kind of stuff I kind of want to talk about a little bit. So we'll go into the harvest process first, and we'll talk about a lot of the considerations that I see on a day-to-day basis. We've done numerous research projects where we kind of put animals in some deficits from a stress perspective or from a nutrition perspective and compare them to animals that are, we would call it a control, but animals that are being, held to the standard that we want, and looking at the differences in yield and quality. and it's tremendous. It doesn't seem like it sometimes, but it is tremendous. And there's a lot of information on these slides, mostly to help me keep on track, because I get to talking and get you straight. All right, so let's just talk about the first step of the harvest situation nobody thinks about, and that's what we call pre-harvest. It's the most step. It's one of the most important steps on kill day. I know we've got some processes in here, but the first thing the inspector wants to do, let's look at these livestock. I need to see what, are they healthy? But even before that, the age of animals that we harvest is going to have a major effect on what kind of product we start out with. And that's just because, everything's kind of directly related to their age. We think about weight, right? Everything's based on weight in the livestock industry. When we sell our products, not everybody sells on weight, we've learned, but we sell our products mostly on weight. And so that's kind of directly related to their age to a certain extent. As they get older, when you start getting animals in their advanced stage and age, they start getting darker, they start getting tougher. All right, they start having off flavors. They have more bruising, they have more scars, things that are going to affect the value of that livestock. So, most animals, 12, 18, 20 months of age is kind of where we can get them finished to what we're trying to produce a product as. And that's going to make your better tasting, more palatable type products. I think Brian talked about this, but 30 months of age. Okay. How many people have had to deal with the 30 months of age thing? Animals over 30 months of age have been determined to have a better chance of being suspect of BSE, mad cow disease. Haven't seen it, but we have a whole set of regulations for it. Most slaughter plants in Louisiana aren't really equipped to handle animals over 30 months of age. Even though they're probably safe, fine, there's not a problem with them. By the way, 30 months of age, okay, that's an animal that has more than 2 adult incisors. Okay? And if we're grading them, and Tyler's going to talk about this, I'm not going to get too far into it, but if we were to grade them, would still be considered grade A. All right, grade A. But we have to treat them differently because of the chance of BSE. So we want to keep those animals below that range to a certain extent, mostly from an inspection perspective and in how we can market that product. Once they reach more than 30 months of age, you can't have any spinal process being sold. So we're going strictly to a strip loin, a boneless ribeye, things like that. No more T-bones. Can't have any backbone along the shoulder chunks or anything like this. So again, after they've erupted the second set of incisors, they don't have to be grown, just erupted. They're considered over 30 months of age. It's a different process. Is it still a wholesome, sellable product? Absolutely, but the plant has regulations on them that makes it hard. You gotta have a separate cooler to have them in. You gotta have a separate gut cooler to have them in. You gotta find something else to do with the offal. So why is that? We're marketing cattle, and all of a sudden we're bringing them and inspectors are saying, hey, you got to take this animal, he's got 4 adult incisors. That can be a problem. So when we talk about marketing our livestock, and absolutely, you can take the blame off of yourself by getting an animal harvested under inspection. Know what you got, because if you put him in inspection and he's got more adult incisors, all of a sudden you might lose that animal. If the plant's not set up to deal with it, you might have to tank it. We don't want to tank them. Obviously, breed, we know this, plays a huge role. Genetics, all animals kind of grow differently. And, that's something we can do in the pre-harvest or the early on stage. We won't get too far into that. Sex, heifers. If we're feeding heifers, that's fine. They produce a good carcass. They'll generally maybe even have a little bit shorter growth pattern to where you can get to market a little bit earlier. But you got some things that can kind of become a problem. If they're going through heat cycles, we don't want to harvest them right then. All right, let's get past that cycle. Let them get their hormonal levels kind of neutralized, and then we go ahead and put them in the harvest. If you harvest them, in a slight stress stage or while they're cycling, you can end up with dark cutters. Okay, Dark cutters, we're going to talk about in a second, but it's a problem with the meat where it's dark, it's dry, and it's just not going to be as appealing. Okay, so we think about that. If we need to bring this girl to market, let's hold off a week. Okay. Stress. This is one of the bigger ones, and this is not something that's intentional. But what's our biggest stressor in the weekend? Heat. Okay, no doubt. Somebody was, I don't remember who the gentleman was, said that their processor's pretty far, closest processor's pretty far from their place. We don't want to jump in a trailer at noon and try to get there before 3 when they quit killing and drop the calf off so they can kill him right quick. You're not going to want that animal. These things we kind of know. We also know we don't want to work cow in the middle of the heat. With, things that we think about that way. Let's think about when we're getting them harvested. Let's get them to the plant. Let's give them a day to cool down, get some of their glycogen stores back. The animals get stressed, they burn that glycogen. We have bad problems with the product. Diet and the stage of finish. I think we know this already. Y'all probably been in more seminars about that than me. Do we all want to feed the same thing? Do we all have the same access? That kind of goes back to what our target's going to be. All right. If we're mostly making a ground beef product, we don't necessarily need to put that 6,500 of an inch of fat on them and grow them out. Let's get their muscle growth going. When we start seeing them rounding out, getting a little bit more fat, then we can maybe market them. We're saving time, we're saving energy, we're saving money, maybe making our product a little more efficient for us. Whereas if we're trying to sell prime steaks or high choice steaks, we got to continue going. And again, so the pre-harvest conditions, one thing we have to do, and it's for further steps, we have to fast the product. Okay, for about 12 to 24 hours, somewhere down there, we want to fast that product, hold them from feed, try to hold them. They can have a little hay, but not too much. Basically, we're trying to get that rumen cooled down and smaller so that when we get to the processing, we're not having guts that are getting blown up and rupturing, and then we got a lot of trim loss. Anytime we have trim loss, what do we have? Weight loss. Anytime we have weight loss, what do we have? Money loss. So something as simple as like taking them off feed a little bit earlier, before we get them harvested, can make some differences for us. Okay. They have to have water. Obviously, we've got to keep water. I didn't put too much on my slides about it, but when we get these animals excited and stressed, they burn all their glycogen out. They're going to have some very off flavors. We'll have some moisture loss. We don't want moisture loss. Okay, so if we can kind of calm them down, we can keep them gentle, we can save our product. There's something up here about blood splashing that I put up there related to stress. Some of these plants might have seen it. We get animals that are really excited prior to harvest, and the capillaries start to rupture. All right, so you cut that steak, and you'll see little specks of blood, or in the fat. We call it fiery fat. Capillaries will get blood splashing in that fat. It's not necessarily terrible for the product, with the exception of you look at it and go, man, what's wrong with this steak? The consumer may not like that. All right, and you're going to have a higher iron content, higher flavor profile, like in that loin area. Bruising. How many people have been through the Master Cattleman program? We heard a lot about bruising, right? Working cattle, dehorning. That's one of the number one causes of money loss in the beef industry is bruising, trim loss, when it comes to the carcass side of things. So all of these things are stuff that we can do prior to getting them, prior to any kind of captive bolt or bleeding or anything. Are they important? Yeah, because we're looking at real world money. So let's get started with the stunning process. Somebody was talking to me earlier. The way we stun livestock is a captive bolt gun. It has a rod. It's a mechanism that has a rod that's driven by a blank, 22, 25 caliber blank. No projectile leaves the gun. It'll come out and it'll pierce the brain. It'll stun them. We have to stun them legally before we can bleed them. Okay, we have to stun them legally. If they're not fully stunned, Brian's coming to your office and we're going to have a chat. Okay, I've heard tell of that at least. But so once we get them stunned, then we can exsanguinate them. We want to do this, which is bleed them. We want to do this quickly and efficiently. One stick wound, smaller the better. Can't go back in 2 or 3 times trying to bleed the animal, because every time you go through that hide, we're introducing contamination. All right, we're introducing contamination. So they want one quick stick, 6 to 8 minutes. We want to get that animal bled out and done. We want to evacuate the body of as much blood as possible and make sure that we can make sure that we get the product that we're looking for. If we have a slow bleed, you have higher incidence of blood splashing, you have higher fiery fat, poor quality. That's not something that's on y'all, but this is things to kind of talk to your producer, your packer about. You know, if you're there and you're watching, you can kind of pay attention to see what's going on. This step is one of the important aspects, because this is where we start the conversion of muscle to meat. Everything that we've done with that livestock prior to that has been on a live basis, and it set them up for success or failure as a quality beef carcass. We didn't feed them long enough, may not have the fat content we're looking for. They may not make the marbling content that we're looking for. They definitely may not make the gain we're looking for. All right. So once we start this process, this is where things start to change. We want a good gradual, slowly decline in pH. We want to make sure that the animal has some glycogen in those muscles, all right, so that they can go through rigor mortis properly. Rigor mortis is just that. How many of y'all have a cramp? Same thing. You have that energy in your muscle, and once we exsanguinate that animal, we stop oxygen transfer. So we can't add any more energy to those muscles. So we want rigor mortis to happen and go through about a 12 to 18-hour period. We want it to go through rigor mortis, kind of a slow decline. We don't want a rapid decline because this could change the pH, and we don't want a really delayed decline. Right. We can start out by having very tough products. We can start out by having products that won't hold moisture if we don't do this correctly. And that all is just kind of related to this step, making sure that we've had them calm, we've stunned them properly, and we've bled them. You know, we're starting out in the right direction. The next step we go into is we're going to start skinning. We'll start the skinning process. We start by removing the head. Got to take the vertebral vertebrae, the last vertebrae, and remove the head. If we were to use a gun, not captive bullet, we couldn't save anything off that head except the tongue. We couldn't save the cheek meat, couldn't sell the whole head. There is some markets for whole heads. That's another reason to use captive bullet. During the skinning process, one of the things that we have to be concerned about is bacteria. The hives coming with bacteria on it. Bacteria is in the outside world they live in, and this is where 90% of our bacterial problems start. Is right here. When we're removing that hide, we're not doing this in a clean aspect. We're transferring bacteria to the carcass itself. Bacteria obviously is going to be negative from many ways. Some of it can be pathogenic. Some of it's going to increase our degradation in a cooler area. If we have too much bacteria load that gets missed and we have them in a cooler, they may age a lot faster. We talked about this already. There's a zero tolerance on contents from visceral. When we're removing the contents, we need to be as careful as possible. We tie off both ends, make sure we don't have any spillage. We also remove the edible organs at this point, the heart, the tongue, the liver, the kidneys. And that all goes to inspection. Any animals that we harvest, the tonsils and the small intestine is what we call specified risk materials. They can't be going, they cannot go into the food chain. However, once they get over 30 months of age, that's when we have to start removing that whole backbone. We have to remove all the root ganglion, and we have more weight loss with the livestock. We'll go through and we'll split the carcass. Pretty simple process. It needs to be done correctly. Half an inch either direction, you start getting into that loin, and we're losing product. We're losing valuable product. Also need to make sure we take proper care to trim and remove all the bone dust. If that's not done correctly, the bone dust will again add in degradation and deterioration of that carcass at a quicker pace. A step that's in here, it doesn't seem like much, but this is the most important from inspections perspective. This is a CCP in HACCP where we have to monitor and we have to make sure we signed off, and we have to make sure there's no fecal, there's no milk, there's no ingesta, there's no contaminations of any kind on that carcass. All right? If we don't do these other steps ahead of properly, we're having weight loss. Okay, we're trimming, we're having weight loss. And then, of course, washing the cooler will get rid of all the blood and the bone dust and try to get a good, clean carcass going into the cooler so that when we get to these next phases, we can ensure that we have a good, wholesome product. It's going to yield us a good product and hopefully not have a lot of weight loss. This is one I kind of want to spend some time on. Chilling and aging, because we've had a lot of questions about chilling and aging, and this is something that is probably on most people's mind that have harvested cattle, either whether you're selling them or if you're keeping them for yourself. Proper chilling is needed for bacteria growth and spoilage. We kind of understand that. A cooler needs to be pretty cold to start that chilling process. We have regulations where we got to get that dropped down pretty fast. Some coolers are allowed to have drip coolers where they have clean moisture or clean sanitized water dripping on the carcass also to help increase or speed up the chilling process. But a good cooler that's somewhere around 28, 33 degrees, within 16 hours, you should get chilled pretty much throughout that carcass. If we take too long, we'll start to get spoilage in the deep portions of the round and the chub. And so sometimes you may have noticed that some of the cuts may have a little bit different color, heat rings, or they'll maybe even have a little odor. Most times that's from a round. That's called round sour, where it just took a little longer, or if we age it for an extensive time, it'll get more of that degraded type smell. It increases tenderness. No doubt, aging will increase tenderness. What we found over the years is 7 days, you have a pretty marginal jump. From 7 to 14 days, it's probably your most drastic change in tenderness that you see. After 14 days of aging, the tenderness the benefits from tenderness go down quickly. They still continue to get tender, but it's not as drastic. What you do start to see, and I don't know, I think the first speaker talked about you'll get moisture loss and a good bit of moisture loss. You will start getting some of that heavy age flavor. If you're looking for some of that acidic or heavy age type flavor, you can do that. What I recommend, and some of the packers might cringe on a little bit, is let's just age that carcass for 7 days, and then can you pull the loins, all right, and age those a little longer. Go ahead and package the product for us. But when we're talking about making a lot of ground meat, you don't need to age it very long. Okay, that's less chance for bacterial growth. That's less chance for loss in moisture. It's going to kind of ensure a little bit better product for you. And if you're looking for a flavor profile change, then yeah, you want to age it a little longer. But that's such a hard spot in a meat plant, because that everything bottlenecks right there. I think y'all all noticed that, heard that. And a lot of plants will have probably a 12, 13 day, that's it, we can't go on because they don't have the space. Now, when we go to processing, we'll talk a little bit about the different types of cuts that we need to think about. The wholesale cuts of beef are all the same. Every beef carcass is cut pretty much the same wholesale cuts. We just have one big carcass. We have to get it where we can manage it. And going back to Brian's talk about the IMP standards and the specialized cuts, we have to start from one wholesale cut so that if I'm selling wholesale cuts to somebody, they can make their retail cuts correctly. So we have the same wholesale cuts we're going to go through. And it's the round and the sirloin. I think we've seen these, the loin, the short loin, the rib, all of these cuts. It's how we dissect carcass. From there, sky's the limit. We're making all ground meat, we can grind the whole thing. We can have a whole calf grind. I don't recommend it. I think we need to keep the tenderloins, and some people want to do that. That's where you got to go back to knowing your market, knowing your target. What are we selling? Who are we selling to? The way we make cuts is going to influence our yield. If we break a carcass down into mostly trimmed products, we're getting rid of more bone, we're getting rid of more fat, we're losing yield. All right, we're losing yield. So we want to think about that. Don't expect, we'll talk to our customer about that. But if you sell a calf to somebody and they say, well, I want them all ground up and give me just the steaks. Well, set them up ahead of time to understand that, well, you're going to get rid of a lot of that weight. You may have a 700-pound carcass when you start out, but you're going to have 10, 15% more weight loss due to the way you're getting it processed. So you can help with that because, people have sold some livestock before and they call back and say, well, I don't think I got all that. We just heard Brian talk about that. Set them up, let them know, we have these number changes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how big those differences are. All right, so kind of back to the beginning of the whole process. We're starting out with livestock. Is it fair to harvest a 600-pound animal and expect to have large cuts with a lot of marbling and a lot of fat? No, it's not. And some customers don't understand that. They think cattle, this is what we're going to get. So smaller, lighter muscle cattle are going to have less yield. It's kind of common sense. If you take the same cattle and you put excess fat on them, you may even have more yield loss, okay, because you have that excess trim loss. And while cattle that have less fat may have higher cutouts, the dressing percent, which is the difference between, dressing percent is an indicator of how much of the carcass can we expect from the live animal. Okay, and it's somewhere around 62% average for heavy fed cattle. For cattle that are in that 1,200, 1,300 pound range, a little bit higher, but 1,100 pound and 1,200 pound cattle should, with some fat cover, if you're looking at 6/10 of fat cover, they're going to have about 62% dress. All right, so that 1,200 pound steer is going to yield you 725 pound carcass. If we kill a 600 pound steer, we're not going to have as much fat. So when we think about dressing percent, how much of that sellable product are we going to have? When we look at the livestock, you don't have to weigh them. He was right. You don't really need to weigh the cattle. Everything's kind of relative to age, size. Okay, so we look at them and we see where they're on a growth pattern. Everything that stays on the carcass, when we pull the hide, the feet, the hair, and the viscera, is going to increase the dressing percent. Anything that comes off that carcass is going to decrease your dressing percent. Okay, so pregnancies, cattle with a lot of fat. We weigh a calf, across the scale, and he's 1,200 pounds, and he had 100 pounds of mud on him. But you don't know. It could happen. So all of those things that can have an effect on dress percent, you kind of look at and know how they're going to affect you, because this is real world numbers. Now, I'm not stealing too much thunder from you, Tyler, but I wanted to get into this because we talk about yield grade, we're going to talk about quality grade, but I want to talk about yield from a perspective of cutout, right? We've all heard of marketing our cattle and we call them a yield grade 1 or yield grade 2, and it's just that. A yield grade is just to estimate how much product do we think that carcass will give us. It's based off of ribeye area, fat thickness, mostly fat thickness, KPH, kidney, heart, pelvic fat, and then hot carcass weight. And we can determine a yield grade. We get a yield grade somewhere between 1 and 5, right? Well, that doesn't mean what's that mean? 1's the best, 5 is the worst, right? When you look at this chart, a 1 can be about 52% of the hanging carcass. Of the hanging carcass, not of the live animal, of the hanging carcass. And then so on and so on. And 4s even go below, 5s even go below. It goes all the way down to around 43%. Now this is for standard heavy fat type cattle, okay? The numbers are going to be the same, but this is all based off of cattle that we went through and trimmed out. This 52% or 53 or 50, these numbers, that's how much you can expect boneless, closely trimmed retail cuts. When we put that in packages and we're going to sell, that's what we can kind of expect. So when you see that yield grade 1, yield grade 2, we know it means something, but these numbers, you kind of get a better understanding. So I put numbers to 1,200 pound cattle, just random numbers, but calculated their dressing percents and their closely trimmed boneless, closely trimmed retail cuts to kind of show you the differences of what we're looking at. So a 1,200 pound steer, address 62%, give your carcass about 744 pounds, give or take, right? That's no mud, no other things that are going to give you a negative effect. 744 pound carcass. A yield grade 3 be right around that 50% yield. Okay? If you're boneless, closely trimmed retail cuts. If we cut a bunch of chuck roast, cut a bunch of bone-in steaks, we keep the shanks, for soup meat, we keep the neck bones for soup meat, we're going to bump that up to 53, 54% maybe. But closely trimmed cuts, like they were talking about earlier, that's 372 pounds of sellable product by my math. And that number seems low. We cut them out every year in class, and we do them kind of close to a boneless, closely trimmed retail cut. I've seen us do them, and these numbers are within 15, 20 pounds. Okay, within 15, 20 pounds. Let's say that steer is a yield grade 5, we're looking at even less. Let's say the steer doesn't have much fat, but is lighter muscle, smaller. Same thing. The yield, you start out with a lot less product, right? Why do we get them up there? We need to get that fat cover on them. We need to get that age and all that to get our quality grades that we're looking for, if that's our market. Okay? If that's not our market, then we're good we can kill them at a leaner weight, maybe a little bit less fat, and we can get higher yields. We can get higher yields off them carcasses. Only 45 pound difference, but when we look at that, it's about $111 loss per carcass, which may not be substantial for some, but can be pretty substantial for a lot. Bone-in steaks and roast are going to be higher, and then obviously leaner cattle are going to yield less. no doubt. And I know I ran through that pretty fast, but questions to ask the packer, the butcher, ask about their abilities, ask about their expectations of your cattle, ask about their handling practices, the cooler space, cooler capacity. Let's hope that they're gonna, I didn't flip the side. Sorry about that. Ask about aging. Okay. And I personally, we have cattle, we get them harvested, and I do the same thing. I'll have them age them for about 7 to 10 days max, full of loins. I don't mind going back and getting them if it's not that far. Guys that we use aren't far. And so we'll just let them age those a little bit longer, and we'll pick the product up ahead of time because we're just eating. We're not selling it. Freezing. If they can freeze the product, packaging, let's go to packaging first. Wrapping versus vacuum packaging. If the product's being sold and consumed quickly, heavy freezer paper is probably fine. When I say quickly, within 6 to 8 months, heavy freezer paper will do the job when it's done properly. Everybody kind of wants products vacuum packed. It gives you a longer shelf life. You can normally flatten the product out a little easier, and you can thaw it easier if you want to thaw and thaw it. It'll thaw without any waste or any moisture loss in your refrigerator. It works. It's going to add cost. Just remember, it's going to add cost. And then freezing capacity. You want to freeze the product as fast as possible. A freezer that's below zero at bare minimum, hopefully to start the freezing process. The longer it takes to freeze the product, the larger the ice crystal. The larger the ice crystal, it's going to rupture that cell membrane, and you're going to have a lot more moisture loss. So if you've ever brought home a lot of product to the house and you had to cram it in the freezer and make everything fit, move the ice cream and get rid of the Slurpees and all this other stuff that you drink half of, and you stack it all in there, it may take a week and a half for that product in the middle to freeze. It will continue to spoil. It will continue to lose moisture, and it's going to grow a lot bigger ice crystal. Most of the people in here I'm looking at have frozen ice in an ice tray before, and we know what we're talking about. Some of the guys to the left have no idea what I'm talking about. What's an ice tray? But think about that. Even Adam probably hasn't used an ice tray. Think about that. If it takes you a long time, you have a bigger ice crystal. If you do it in a -30, that ice crystal stays the same size it was when it went in the tray. And it's going to make a huge difference on your product. Can everybody do that for you? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a consideration to think about when we're preparing this product for either resale or for consumption. Okay, it's just all of these things. There's a step in the process that can have a negative effect and a positive effect on your product. I know your packer's going to have more respect for you. It's going to be a better transaction if you talk to them about all of these things ahead of time, and you don't come back and say, well, I mean, he was 1,200 pounds. That's 500 pounds of meat. Don't ask for it back. They got 4 barrels waiting for you, and they'll give it to you. I promise you, they'll give it to you. So, I don't know one more time. I know I went kind of quick. Yeah. Well, we might have questions. We may not have questions because they've touched on a lot of this. But pre-harvest is important. Getting the cattle set up for success starts at the farm. Knowing what kind of product they're going to produce for what we're looking to produce starts at the farm. Keeping them calm is going to help you out tremendously, because it doesn't take as long as you think to turn that good calf into a dark cutter or into a calf that's going to have a pool of moisture underneath it in the cooler, and you're going to have a not very good eating experience. Talk to the plant manager and produce within your means. We don't all have the same abilities. We don't all have the same acreage. We don't have, is consistency important? Absolutely. Within your herd, be consistent. Be consistent. That'll sell more every time. So, question, and I can sit here and answer some questions or not answer questions, but yes, sir.
Chris, of the animal. At my process, I got to bring them over the morning of or drop them off the night before. Which one would be less stress? What do you think of that?
Less stress is always going to be the night before. If you can bring them the night before, that's the best. Make sure they have water. Don't be ugly, but kind of look around the facilities. Make sure they don't have protrusions. They don't have trip and falls. They don't have something that cattle can get injured on. They don't have some high-headed calf that's running around and, But yeah, always the day before, because they get excited when you get on that trailer. I get excited when I put cattle on the trailer. I know they're excited. Did I lock the gate? Are they going to run up? We had cattle run up. Well, I can't say it, but yeah, the night before is better. Even 2 days. Some plants will take them 2 days. If you hold them 2 days, the first day, ask them if they do that. They can take a little hay or something just to keep them a little bit. But you want a good 12 to 14-hour fast so that when the guys go to eviscerate them, they don't have spoiled. Repeat the question. Okay. But you should have hollered that to me first. The question was, when you bring the animal to the slaughterhouse, is it better to bring them the morning of, afterwards? What's best? Give them time to rebuild their glycogen. What happens when animals get excited? They lose the energy in their muscle. So when they go to that rigor mortis stage, it happens quicker, and it will put you in a deficit from a quality perspective right away. Another thing, I didn't talk about it. If you're collecting, you get your product warm, and for whatever reason you want to chill it, you don't want it in contact with ice. You don't want it in contact with anything frozen, because it'll freeze those muscles in that stage of rigor mortis, and that will be, again, it's going to be something that you can't break those cross bridges. Once that starts under ice, they're tough, and they're tough forever. You got a lot of gravy steaks. Likewise, when you're chilling your product, as much of it being bone in and attached to the skeleton, the better. Because when we go through rigor, think of a cramp in your leg, that muscle's contracting and contracting. It doesn't have the energy to relax, so it's contracting. If it's not attached to bone, it will ball up. Hence, animals over 30 months of age. Some plants may take it on a kill floor and say, look, I can kill your animals over 30 months of age. Shake your head back there. I was just saying some plants. But I have to remove the backbone on the kill floor. Well, what's that going to do? You're losing that skeleton. Remember, that frame is the skeleton that all these cuts are attached to. So if we go through rigor mortis in a boneless situation, it bunches up and it's going to be tough. How many people have ever harvested a deer and they threw it in an ice chest and they buried it in ice and go, man, this thing's tough. All right, they took it off the bone, they made the back straps boneless, they chunked them in there because they got an ice chest this big, and they got another ice chest for all the beverages, the waters and things. And so they pile it all up in one boneless and put ice on it. It bunches up, and it's tough. It's always going to be tough. It's not going to relax. Whereas when you have it attached to the bone, it goes through a slow rigor, then it can go through the natural degradation during aging, and it'll be a better product. So those are things to talk to the butcher about. We're not going to have to push it into a cooler or a freezer or something like that. Talk to the guys. Always communicate. And that's in life in general. But other questions? Yes, sir. The marbling process and what increases that. I think Tyler's going to talk a little bit about that. But the number one thing that affects marbling is genetics. That starts when you open up that sire breed and you decide what you want to raise. It's genetics. Now, Are some breeds better at marbling than others? Yes. Do all breeds have acceptable genetics to marble under the right conditions? Absolutely. So marbling is a genetics first, then feed. All right. Grass-fed animals can get to a highly marbled state. Are they going to do it under 30 months of age? No, probably not, in my opinion, unless you have very early maturing on some really heavy, high-energy grasses. So extra feed is going to increase that marbling. And then they have to be at a certain stage of growth to where they start to put that marbling. Fat layers go in 3 layers or 4 layers, internal, external. Tyler, am I going too far? External fat, intermuscular fat between the muscles, and then marbling, intramuscular fat. It's the last layer to be deposited. So if you think of watching a baby grow, it's the same thing as they go through their growth phase. When they stop putting on muscle and bone, that extra energy starts going into marbling and fat cover and things like that. So it's a function of having some genetics that have a higher propensity for marbling, and then putting them in the right health status and dietary status at the right time while they're on Earth to get that marbling going. Yes, sir.
Shrink or stress, however you want to address it, affect quality grade to take, say, from a high choice to a select?
Absolutely. The question is, will stress or effects of stress affect the quality grade from going to a choice to a select or something like that? And that is, yes, it will. I tried not to touch that too much because I think Tyler was going to talk some about that. But what happens is with these dark cutters, when we grade a chop or steak, we look at marbling, color of lean, color of skeletal color or condition. The reason we're doing that is we're trying to determine the age. We have a chart that we assign a quality grade by that's determined by age versus marbling. If animals get into that dark cutter, they have a higher color of lean score. It could push them into B maturity and makes that quality grade go down. Likewise, if an animal is graded as a dark cutter, I'm sorry I don't have pictures. A dark cutter is going to be dark purple, going to be dry. And this is when we're looking at the loin eye, okay, when we separate the carcass. When we look at that loin eye, it's going to be dark, it's going to be, it can be dry, or it can have moisture wicking up on it and gets kind of sticky. If it gets deemed a dark cutter, it can only be select or lower. Unless it's really high prime, it knocks it down a quality. So if it's really high prime, most high prime cattle are too lazy to get excited and get to be a dark cutter. So, question? Yes, sir.
Any testing labs?
Beef testing for as shear force. For the public at the moment, not that I know of, unless your cattle got assigned to one of the projects. We do that. That's one of my jobs, some of the stuff that I do from a research perspective. An individual, or not an individual, but a researcher has a feed trial or a genetic trial, something like that. We collect samples from those animals and we'll cook them and do a shear force analysis. To my knowledge, I don't know of anybody that offers that, but I don't know why not. Maybe that's something we could talk to administration about to do that. It would be a good marketing tool. Tenderness is not necessarily a function of marbling, with the exception of if you have a lot of fat in that muscle product, it's going to feel like you're chewing through more tender product. But tenderness is mostly, it's going to be a genetic related trait and or a condition of the animal, if we have a stress situation or something like that. But when we do tenderness evaluations, we're cutting a cross section of a sample that's been cooked to 70 degrees internal temperature, and then we take a 1/2 inch core and we cut through that. We're measuring in muscle fiber tenderness. That's what we're looking at. It would be a great marketing trait It's something that some breed associations have done over the years, and a lot of them are kind of coming back too. So it gets done at universities, but normally it's through some kind of trial. But for individuals, not that I know of, but maybe we need to talk about that. I'm looking at Ashley.
So I know,
It's not all hamburgers.
no, not all hamburgers ready.
Not all hamburgers created equal. Correct.
Grinding.
The grinding mechanism, so the size of the grind will have an effect. The way you get that product to the desired level will have an effect. The more you run a product through and stress that product through a mechanized system, the more loss you may end up with. If you have if we're grinding product, we'll coarse grind our trimmings. The trimmings is the small pieces of meat that comes when you cut the rest of the animal up. We'll coarse grind it first and then run it through the small holes so that we're not trying to force too large of a piece of meat to a tiny hole and you get smearing or mashing. If you working product that's too hot, all right, you're going to separate that fat, that internal fat and that fat that's attached to muscle. You'll overwork it and you'll separate it, and that's where you'll get that hamburger product quality that's not as good. It may look the same. When you cook it, you have more moisture loss. But it could be that you just had too much fat to begin with, but it also could be the way that the mechanism was, the product was ground.
So I spoke with the family who won a hamburger contest stage. What did he describe it? I'm 60. Chill the meat again. I'm 60 person. That makes sense.
So the gentleman said that an individual he knows had ground the product through a 9/64 inch plate. So if somebody do the math, that's a pretty fine plate, right? And then chilled it and did it again. I would like to know what she started with for particle size. Okay, we'll start with a 1/2 inch plate or larger. I have one that's a 3/4 inch plate, and I'll break that product down to a 3/4 inch plate. Now I'm at almost not frozen temperature, but very chilled product in a very chilled environment. I'll break that down to a smaller particle, then go to the 9/64, so the 1/8 or 1/16 plate, depending on what the customer, what we're doing. If we're making chili meat or if we're making ground meat. And I'll break it down slower to where I don't overstress the product. But definitely if she ground it one time and then she chilled it before grinding it the second time, she's going to have a better effect than if she ran it through and then ran it through again. It's going to warm up in that grinder. Okay, so that will have a major effect on the product that you deal with. So that's something that a lot of folks don't know. Any more questions? Yes, sir. Do they have to be grain fed 120 days to get the white fat marbling? That's not a question I really want to try to tackle because yes, you need to feed cattle in an excess energy situation to a certain extent to get higher contents of marbling if they have the genetic potential to get the high content of marbling. If you want to give white fat, and what I consider white fat, somebody else may be different. If you feed animals grain on grass, okay, totally acceptable, but are you going to get a pure white fat with some grass in there? What happens when we feed grass? We get some green, some yellowing to the fat, all right, from the grass products. 120 days is kind of a standard to get cattle that have they're set up, you know, from a backgrounding perspective, they're healthy, they're on the right diet, they got the genetic potential. 120 days should get you to choice or average choice if they have that potential. Do they have to be fed there? It just depends on the overall situation, your environment. There's a lot of other things that do that, but yes, 120 days of help. Some of the stuff going around right now, we're working with some Wagyu cattle, not the Yale brands and this and that, but I mean, you're seeing all these cattle are being fed 200 days, 250 days sometimes, 300 days, depending on how they started. So the premise behind that is the longer the better. To get them in that growth curve, they stop putting on it fat. I mean, they stop putting on muscle and bone. They're going to put on fat. So the longer they're on feed, the more fat they're going to get. Yep.
Should have had that in there.
You did. So, other questions?